Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a sledgehammer to some of the most persistent, stress-inducing myths in the entire world of language learning. You know, if you've ever felt anxious about, say, not sounding like a quote-unquote native speaker in a second language, well, you are absolutely going to want to pay close attention. We're unpacking some incredibly eye-opening research that totally changes how we view the language learning brain. Think about this quote from Roger Ascham. He was actually an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, writing way back in 1570. He essentially argues that a person with only one language is like a hawk trying to fly with one wing. It's just a beautiful thought, isn't it? I mean, historically, being bilingual was immensely admired. Yet today, so many language learners are completely paralyzed by this modern anxiety of trying to perfectly mimic a native speaker. We've kind of lost that historical admiration, and today, we're going to use science and sociology to get it back. So here's our roadmap. Number 1, the native speaker myth. Number 2, native speakerism and inequality. 3, the multi-competent mind. 4, how language changes thought. And finally, number 5, redefining goals. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the native speaker myth. When you dive into the statistics compiled by linguist Vivian Cook, the numbers are just staggering. Get this, there are 2 billion people learning English globally. Within the European Union alone, there are 438 distinct languages spoken. Over in California, nearly 43% of people speak a language other than English at home, and a massive 90% of children across Europe are taught English in secondary school. The big takeaway here? Multilingualism is actually the modern global norm. Seriously, if you only speak one language, you're the exception. You're living a surprisingly sheltered life, linguistically speaking. So it really begs the question, why on earth do we continue to hold the monolingual native speaker up as the ultimate gold standard? Section 2, native speakerism and inequality. Well, that brings us to a fascinating concept defined by applied linguist Adrian Holiday, native speakerism. Basically, it's an ideology that upholds so-called native speakers as the absolute best models, specifically because they supposedly represent a Western culture that gets falsely idealized. Holiday points out that this whole concept of the native speaker isn't actually rooted in objective linguistic science. Instead, it's a socially constructed brand. It was essentially created by American and British agencies back in the 1960s to spread English as a global commercial product. And this false binary Holiday critiques has real-world consequences. The language industry created these standard acronyms, NS for native speaker and NNS for non-native speaker. The NS is stereotyped as autonomous, Western, and ideal. On the flip side, the NNS is treated as deficient, othered, and geographically limited. Holiday argues this actually acts as a form of neo-racism. It perpetuates this cultural disbelief that non-Western teachers can effectively teach. It creates widespread employment discrimination where hiring is based on this false marker of Western whiteness rather than actual teaching ability. It's a toxic brand that frankly diminishes brilliant educators all over the world. Section 3, the multi-competent mind. Enter Vivian Cook's incredibly empowering concept, multi-competence. Defined simply, multi-competence is the knowledge of more than one language in the same mind. This flips the script entirely. Instead of viewing someone learning a second language as some sort of defective, failing native speaker, the multi-competence framework treats the second language user as a unique, whole person in their own right. Their mind is fundamentally different from a monolingual's mind. And guess what? That is a feature, not a bug. Cook actually refers to the old way of thinking as the comparative fallacy. Think about it like this. If you have a really great pear, you wouldn't judge its quality by comparing it to an apple, right? Because it's a completely different fruit. Similarly, comparing a second language user to a monolingual native speaker is just as illegitimate. You're measuring a complex bilingual mind using a rubric designed for someone who has only ever known one language. It makes absolutely no sense when you really think about it. Under Cook's framework, your first language, your L1, and your second language, your L2, aren't totally walled off from each other. They interact with other mental processes to form a total interwoven language system in your mind. They are completely symbiotic. Yes, your first language influences your second, but crucially, learning that second language also reaches back and permanently alters your first language. You literally become a completely new linguistic entity. Section 4, how language changes thought. Which brings us to a seriously mind-blowing question. Does learning a new language actually permanently change how your brain perceives physical colors in the real world?
The answer is a resounding yes. Based on a 2009 study by Athanasopoulos, we see some fascinating shifts. In English, we basically have one main category for blue, but in Greek, there are two distinct colors, blue and galazio. Japanese and Russian also have separate, distinct words for light and dark blues. The research actually showed that when an English speaker learns one of these languages, their physical perception of color permanently shifts. They begin to literally see two distinct colors where they previously only saw one. Adding that second language completely rewired their visual perception. How wild is that?
Okay, so what about grammar? Can the grammatical rules of a new language alter how you visually categorize physical shapes? Let's find out. There is a famous 1958 study by Carroll and Casagrande that beautifully demonstrates linguistic relativity using the Navajo language. In Navajo, you actually have to use different verb endings depending on the physical shape and rigidity of an object, like whether it's a long, flexible rope versus a long, rigid stick. The study showed that children who spoke Navajo categorized physical objects completely differently than English-speaking children. They relied much more heavily on the object's form and rigidity rather than its size or color. The grammar they spoke, quite literally, dictated how they organized the physical world. And we absolutely can't skip this next one. It's just brilliant. In a 1977 study by Benzeev, researchers told kids, okay, the new way to say we is with the word spaghetti. How would you say we are good children? Monolingual children really struggled with this. But bilingual children, they readily answered spaghetti are good children. Why? Because possessing a multi-competent mind gave them enhanced cognitive flexibility. They understood the arbitrariness of language so much better than the monolinguals. They implicitly knew that words are just flexible symbols. Section 5. Redefining language learning goals. So what does all this mean for us today? Here are the new goals we should be taking into the classroom. First, we need to completely drop those discriminatory NS and NNS acronyms. They really only serve to domesticate a prejudice system. Second, we have to abandon the unattainable native speakers standard. It's a marketing myth, plain and simple. Third, we need to set realistic goals based on how second languages are actually used in the real world. And finally, teachers and students need to stop feeling guilty about using their first language in the classroom. Your L1 and L2 are part of the exact same connected mind. Using your native language is a shortcut to deeper comprehension. It is not a failure. Listen to this powerful metaphor from Vivian Cook back in 2008. He notes that the old way of doing second language acquisition research is being destroyed by a black hole, but it's coming out the other side through a wormhole, reconstituted into something else entirely. We are undergoing a massive paradigm shift here. We're finally moving away from a severe monolingual bias and stepping into a reality that actually respects the complex, brilliant reality of human language acquisition. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time you study a language, ask yourself, are you just trying to be a pale imitation of a native speaker, or are you ready to embrace your identity as a genuine, cognitively enhanced, multi-competent user? It's time to stop chasing an impossible manufactured standard and start celebrating the incredible bilingual brain you are building. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.